we're going to move on to our last talk of the morning, which is by Nick Bearman, who's a freelancer and also head of OSGeo UK. He's going to give a quick overview of OSGeo UK's GoFundGeo project, talk about who it supports and how you can have a say as to which projects get the dodge. I think that's correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, sorry. Great. Thanks, Val. Okay. So yeah, I'm Nick Bearman. It's great to have you here today. So I'm not going to fill my full 15 minutes, so we'll finish for lunch earlier. So I'm sure that will be good for everyone. I want to say a little bit about GoFundGeo. You still hear me at the back? Yeah, great. And before that, I want to mention very briefly OSGeo UK. So we're the organisation who kind of coordinate the FOSS4G UK with the local chapter of OSGeo to run the FOSS4G international conferences. Some of the people on the screen are here today, some of them aren't, but we try and keep things going year to year. We've also had lots of extra help with specific conferences, and I'll talk more about that later. But the reason I wanted to mention is we also do this thing called GoFundGeo. So we donate the surplus from these sorts of events to fund UK geospatial related projects in its kind of biggest sense. We've been doing this as a kind of formal process. This will be our third year, and we have a kind of process that we've adopted. So every year at our AGM, we use these surplus funds to support different projects. People can submit different projects. We've heard about a few of them already. So TerraDraw, James Milner has been supported for a couple of years. We're also looking at supporting GeoServer this year as well. So we had that mentioned previously. So it's great to support these different things. And some of the names you'll obviously know already. And I wanted to ask James to come down very briefly and tell us a little bit about how GoFundGeo has actually helped TerraDraw. So he's put a little bit of blurb and it's on the website as well. And he's also going to talk to us a little bit now.
Yeah, you're probably sick of hearing from me, but yeah, that's obviously the blurb that I've written up here, so I won't repeat that. But yeah, I think GoFundGeo has basically been instrumental in just terms of, I don't know how many hours I've spent working on TerraDraw, probably in the hundreds, and sometimes it's like it's difficult to necessarily justify like the amount of time and energy that it requires to work on a project of kind of that size. And so GoFundGeo is basically, you know, without that money, it would kind of be hard to justify that level of like investment of my own time. So yeah, without it, it's just been sort of instrumental in terms of keeping TerraDraw going and keeping, yeah, you know, there's lots of stuff that's come out of that, like, you know, nearly at 500 stars on GitHub, and there's over 30 projects now that rely on TerraDraw, that at least open source projects. Who knows? I can't count how many closed source because you just don't have the data. But yeah, it's absolutely vital. And yeah, I think it also it allowed me to think more about like how to make the project more sustainable. So thinking about potentially like setting up the things that I need to be able to accept donations potentially from like other organizations. So that was just super useful as well, just in terms of like getting me in that headspace and thinking more like long term about the project rather than just like, oh, like what thing shall I add next? It's more like it's given some structure in terms of like part of the GoFundGeo application is you have to say like what you're going to do. So actually that gives some structure and some like long-term vision to that whole project. So yeah. Yeah, and also like massive shout out to you, Nick, because like just huge amount of effort I know in just coordinating and with all of the OSGeo UK committee and team. So yeah, just really grateful for your hard work and everybody else's as well.
Great, thanks, Jake. Great, thanks, James. That's really useful. And it's great to hear what our money goes towards. And we're not really talking huge amounts of money here. You know, we're not paying James a full-time salary. We gave him £800 2 years ago and £1,000 last year. So it's great to see some of the large amount of impact that a relatively small amount of money can have. So thank you very much for that. And I wanted to kind of say a little bit about the OSGeo community project process as well. So I think Joe asked very briefly about that earlier, and it is part of a larger thing. So a community project is the kind of base level of being registered with OSGeo UK, and there's some very kind of minimal requirements. It's a geospatial project, people can participate in it, and it's open source in its kind of general open sense. And for a lot of projects, that's fine, and it's a kind of rubber stamp to say, yes, it's an open geospatial project. But there are further options as well. So they have an incubation process where they can provide support from international OSGeo in terms of developing a project. And so this might be, there's a whole range of different things so that you might need for a project. And we're also open to other suggestions. So for anybody who's been through the process or is a community project wants to do more, tell us what you want. It's quite an open process. So if there's specific things you need, let us know what they are. And do have a look at the website as well. So there's a lot of information on there. Feel free to have a look and come and have a chat to me or James or anybody else after lunch or after the event today. We're very happy to talk to you about it. And I also wanted to mention very briefly about how do we go about funding open source software? And there is no easy answer to that. There's lots and lots of different ways of doing this. And GoFundGeo is kind of our contribution to this to fund software in one particular way. If you want to find out more, I'd really recommend you have a look at Paul Ramsey's keynote from FOSS4G 2023. So Paul Ramsey runs Crunchy Data, and they do a lot of work with PostGIS, that's Postgres. And he talks about what we owe one another, the political economy of open source. And it's well worth it if you're interested in how do we do this sort of thing. And he talks about some different models, consultancy being a key one, but possibly not a very sustainable one. And then distribution as quite an old model, but potentially some very interesting potential with cloud distribution. And people are willing to pay for convenience. So if you can package something, people will often pay for that, depending on what they're doing with it. So definitely have a look at that as well. And lastly, GoFundGeo needs funding for this sort of thing. So we typically use surplus from FOSS4G UK's. We've also often had, FOSS4G UK's. We've had lots of support from our national sponsors. So this was from FOSS4G UK last year. So Address Cloud, British Geological Survey, and Aston. And we've also had support from the sponsors this year as well. And your ticket funds will go into the OSGeo UK pot for that partly fund bit. So thank you very much for that. We've also had some specific funding from the RGS Geoscience Research Group. So they put in some money into the pot as well. So if you, your company, anyone you know is interested in funding, please come and talk to us. We're always interested in this. And it's a great way of supporting open source geo in the UK without having to choose what project and to manage that side of things. We can do that for you. This year we have a budget of about £6,000. That's the plan. And we're still open to new projects. So if you've got a project you think could be funded, have a look at the website and then please do send in your submissions. So the deadline is tomorrow. I know that's pretty soon. But we don't need a huge amount. It's supposed to be an easy application process. So or short paragraph, what is it you're funding? Why is it useful? Who's going to do it? And how much do you want? Very, very simple line. A paragraph is the minimum. And then the other side is how do we decide what we're going to fund? And we want this to be an open process, that's part of our philosophy. So we talk about this at the AGM. So I'm going to circulate the submissions on Thursday, and then we'll talk about them at the AGM on Monday. So talk about the different applications. And if we don't have enough money to fund them all, we'll have to pick. So if you want to come be a part of that conversation, come along to the AGM. It's going to be online. It's Monday, the 18th. And there's more details on the website. And AGM is at 1 o'clock on Monday. So come along, it'll be an online, probably a Zoom meeting. So come along, share your views, And then all of this information is on the website as well as people's proposals. So please come and have a look at those. Let us know your comments as well. Great, and that's everything from me. Thank you very much. Happily have any questions, or we can go for lunch.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you very much, Nick. Very interesting and useful to know. Any questions about the process or anything else? Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is maybe partly a question for James, but it might be something Nick can answer as well. On it, James, you mentioned it had helped you sort of think about how to accept donations for your project and give it that kind of structure. Was that something that was provided support through the incubation side of things, or is that something you just sort of did yourself to be able to engage in that way? Yeah, just interested.
I'll let James answer that one. Thank you for the question. It's a great question.
Yeah, it is a really good question, actually. So in the first year, essentially like it's a bit like bureaucratic and potentially boring and just accounting talk. But I think it's like as a UK citizen, you're allowed up to like what's £1,000 a year for what's called like I can't remember the technical name for it, but it's basically you're just allowed an allowance of income that is like not from your like KYE or like day job essentially. So it was under that amount. So it was just like I could just accept the money directly. But then once you start going over that, you have to start thinking about like basically you would have to file a tax return and all this kind of stuff. So now what I've done is I actually have like a company set up that can accept money like any company would essentially. But yeah, no, it wasn't something that was specifically it's just something I guess I've handled myself, but maybe that's something that we could talk about, like what's the like structure, like how do you set that up?
Yeah.
I think another just off the back of that as well is like it allows for GitHub donations, like you have to have a bank account basically to pay into, and so that is another benefit, just like thinking about that a bit more strategically.
Yeah, no, we had quite a discussion with James about tax and that sort of thing, and there's no kind of formal structure to our support. So we're happy to help whenever we can. You know, if people have questions, are happy to share our experiences. You know, I'm self-employed, so I do a tax return, so I could share all that experience. I'm not a lawyer, etc., but I'm very happy to share that experience. And if it's just you on a project or you're the main person, it's quite intimidating sometimes, all the stuff you have to think about. And different people have different approaches. You know, I think James's was he went through the books quite formally and did the process. And as you know, different people have different approaches to that, so it's not necessarily required. But it helped him create TerraRaw what it is now. So I think that was a key part of the process, and we're happy to help with any element of that people need.
Cool. Unless there's any other burning questions, you can probably hear the rustling going on over there. So we will stop for lunch. But if Robin, you could make yourself known to Sam, say about 1:40. We're going to be back here at 1:45 to start the sessions. Could we just give a round of applause to all the speakers for this morning? And given how many of us there are, just bear with us as we do some queue management for food. But thank you very much. Enjoy.